Hannah's knees touched the cold diner floor as the gang leader's laughter echoed around her. Then a chair scraped in the corner, and the most dangerous man in the state whispered 5 words that changed everything. She's not gonna do that. What happens when the person who saves you is more dangerous than the person hurting you? When the hero's hands are bloodier than the villain's? Hannah Richmond was about to discover that sometimes salvation doesn't come from angels, it comes from ghosts with debts to pay. Before we proceed, please hit the subscribe button before this story disappears from your feed forever. Let us know where you're watching from, and also answer, have you ever witnessed someone being humiliated and done nothing? Let's talk about it. What stopped you? Let's go into our story. Hannah Richmond's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She blamed it on the cold, always the cold, never the truth, as she wiped down table 6 for what must have been the 4th time that shift. The rag moved in circles across the cracked formica, erasing rings left by coffee cups and the greasy fingerprints of truckers who'd passed through Rosie's diner like ghosts. 42 years she'd been doing this. 42 years of swallowing words that wanted to escape, of forcing smiles that never reached her eyes, of making herself invisible enough to survive. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering in that maddening rhythm that made her think of a dying heartbeat. Her silver hair, pinned back with the same tortoiseshell clip she'd worn since 1987, caught the sickly light as she moved between tables. The diner was nearly empty, just old Mr. Peterson nursing his decaf in booth 3, and that man in the corner, the one who'd been sitting there for over an hour, coffee gone cold, saying nothing, just watching. She'd learned not to ask questions about men like that. The bell above the door chimed, and Hannah's stomach dropped so fast she thought she might be sick. She didn't need to look up to know who'd just walked in. The temperature in the room seemed to change, the air getting thicker, harder to breathe. The laughter hit first, too loud, too sharp, the kind that had edges designed to cut. Then came the boots on linoleum, heavy and deliberate, announcing themselves like a declaration of war. Dennis Timrow filled the doorway like a stain spreading across clean fabric. They called him Tiger, though Hannah had never understood why. Tigers were supposed to be majestic, weren't they? Beautiful and terrible all at once. There was nothing beautiful about Dennis Timrow, just terrible. His leather jacket was a roadmap of violence, patches depicting skulls and serpents, and words Hannah wouldn't say aloud even in prayer. Behind him, 3 more crimson vipers filtered in, their eyes already scanning the diner for something to break, someone to hurt, some small corner of the world they could poison just because they could. Well, well, Tiger's voice scraped across the sudden quiet like nails on a chalkboard. Looks like Grandma's still working the late shift. Hannah kept her eyes down, pen hovering over her order pad, hand trembling so badly the words she'd written, table 3, decaf, apple pie, looked like they'd been penned during an earthquake. Evening, gentlemen. Sit anywhere you like.
Anywhere we like, Tiger mimicked, pitching his voice high and mocking, and his crew erupted like this was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. You hear that, boys? We got permission. They took the center booth. Of course they did. That's where men like Tiger always sat, right in the middle of everything, demanding to be seen, forcing everyone else to acknowledge their existence or pretend not to. Hannah had gotten good at pretending. She'd had practice. A husband who drank himself to death by 53, a son who'd left for California 20 years ago and never called, not even at Christmas, a town that had watched her struggle and looked away because looking away was easier than helping. She approached with the coffee pot, that professional smile already fixed in place. It was a mask she'd worn so long it felt like part of her face now, Like if she ever took it off, there'd be nothing underneath, just a hollow space where a person used to be. "What can I get you?" Her voice was steady. That much, at least, she could control. Tiger leaned back, boots up on the vinyl seat, leaving dark smudges she'd have to scrub out later. "What's the special, sweetheart? And don't you dare try to upsell me some garbage." "Meatloaf with mashed potatoes and—" "Meatloaf," he snorted, and it sounded like a pig rooting in filth. "That's what they serve in nursing homes, ain't it? Probably where you should be instead of shuffling around here like some kind of zombie." The laughter came again, louder this time, meaner. Hannah's jaw tightened, just barely, just enough that if someone had been watching closely, really closely, they might have seen it, might have understood that beneath the trembling hands and the quiet voice, there was still something left, some small piece of her that hadn't been ground down to dust. "I'll give you boys a minute to decide," she said, already turning away. "Hey!" Tiger's voice cracked through the air like a gunshot. "Did I say you could walk away?" In the corner booth, the man in the charcoal suit shifted. It was a small movement, barely perceptible, but somehow it felt larger than it should have. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. He hadn't touched it in the last 30 minutes, but his eyes, dark as motor oil, older than his face, hadn't stopped moving, tracking, calculating, remembering things he'd probably spent years trying to forget. Hannah turned back, and the smile on her face was starting to crack at the edges. "I apologize. What would you like to order?" Tiger stood up, and the threat in it was unmistakable. He was 6'2", built like violence was his first language, and cruelty his second. All thick shoulders and scarred knuckles, and eyes that never learned empathy because no one had ever bothered to teach him. He moved into Hannah's space, close enough that she could smell the cigarettes and cheap whiskey on his breath, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. She didn't meet his eyes. That was rule number 1 for surviving men like Tiger. Never look them directly in the eye. It was either a challenge or an invitation, and either way, it ended badly. "I don't like your attitude, old woman." His voice had gone quiet now, and somehow that was worse than the yelling. "You think you're better than us? You think we're trash?" "I don't think anything of the sort, sir. You just what?" He grabbed the coffee pot from her hands, and Hannah flinched. Her body remembered things her mind tried to forget. Every time someone had taken something from her without asking. Every moment she'd been made to feel small and powerless and wrong for existing. The coffee pot felt like 1,000 pounds as it left her grip. "You just want to treat paying customers like dirt?" "Dennis, please!" The voice came from the booth behind him. Marcus, the new kid, barely 20, with eyes that hadn't gone dead yet. Tiger rounded on him so fast, Marcus actually flinched back. "You're defending her, Marcus? You want to get cut from the Vipers? You want to go back to being nobody?" The young man looked down at his hands, and whatever he'd been about to say died in his throat. That's how it always went. Good intentions crushed under the weight of self-preservation. Hannah had seen it 1,000 times. Hell, if he'd lived it 1,000 times. Tiger turned back to her, and now there was something ugly crawling across his face, something that made Hannah's blood run cold. "Tell you what, Grandma, you get down on your knees and apologize for your disrespect, and maybe I'll let you serve us."
The diner held its breath. Mr. Peterson stared down at his pie like it held the secrets of the universe. The cook had vanished into the kitchen, the door swinging shut with a sound like a coffin closing. The 2 truckers who'd been arguing about the best route to Denver suddenly found their coffee fascinating. This was Maple Ridge in microcosm. Good people turning away, looking down, pretending not to see, because seeing meant choosing, and choosing meant consequences. Hannah's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She'd cried enough in her life. cried when her husband came home drunk and mean, cried when her son left without saying goodbye, cried when she realized she'd be working this diner until the day she died because Social Security wasn't enough to live on and pride didn't pay the electric bill. She was done crying, but she was also done fighting. 42 years had taught her one lesson above all others. The world didn't reward courage. It rewarded compliance. It rewarded making yourself small enough that predators lost interest. Tigers, the real ones, not the cheap imitations standing in front of her, didn't attack prey that played dead. They moved on to something more entertaining. So Hannah started to lower herself toward the ground. Her knees protested. 64 years of standing on hard floors had turned her joints to rusty hinges, but she bent anyway. Survival was a muscle she'd exercised too long to let it atrophy now. The linoleum was cold. She could feel it even before her knees touched down. Cold and dirty, and exactly where men like Tiger wanted women like her, on the ground, looking up, acknowledging their power. Then, the chair in the corner scraped against the floor. The sound cut through everything, through Tiger's ugly grin, through the suffocating silence, through 42 years of Hannah making herself invisible. It was such a simple sound, just wood on linoleum, but it felt like the world shifting on its axis, like gravity reversing, like the moment before lightning strikes when the air gets heavy with electricity and possibility. The man in the charcoal suit stood, and somehow, impossibly, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He wasn't tall, maybe 5'10" on a good day, but he carried himself with a stillness that made the space around him feel charged, dangerous, like standing too close to a high-voltage wire. His suit had seen better days. The cuffs were frayed, one elbow patched with fabric that didn't quite match, but it still held its dignity the way some men hold on to principles even when the world tells them to let go. His face was weathered, carved by time and something harder than time. A scar ran along his left jaw, puckered and old, the kind you got from a knife that had been meant to kill but had settled for marking you instead. But it was his eyes that made Tiger's grin falter. Dark as motor oil, ancient as sin, patient as death itself. He walked toward the center booth with steps that made no sound, and when he spoke, his voice was so soft that everyone leaned in to hear it, like he was sharing a secret meant only for them. She's not going to do that. 5 words, that's all it took to change everything. Tiger spun around, puffing up the way small dogs do when they sense something bigger than them, trying to convince themselves and everyone watching that size was just a state of mind. "Who the hell are you?" The man stopped 3 feet away, hands loose at his sides, relaxed in a way that somehow felt more threatening than Tiger's clenched fists. Someone who's asking nicely, once. Tiger laughed, but it sounded forced, brittle like glass about to shatter. Something in the older man's eyes, something ancient and patient and absolutely certain, made the laughter die in Tiger's throat. The other vipers were watching now, exchanging glances, recalculating odds they'd thought were fixed in their favor. "You making a threat, old man?" "Observation," the stranger said, and his voice remained soft, almost gentle. "The lady has worked a full shift. She's been respectful, and you're going to sit down, order your food, eat it quietly, pay your bill, and leave her alone. Or what?" The stranger smiled, and it was the saddest thing Hannah had ever seen, like a man remembering everyone he'd ever killed and wondering if any of it had mattered. "Or, I'll remind you what consequences feel like."
Tiger's hand moved toward his jacket, toward whatever weapon he kept there, probably a knife, maybe a gun, but the stranger's hand was already inside his own coat. He didn't draw anything, didn't need to.
The movement itself was a language spoken fluently in certain circles, and Tiger was suddenly, viscerally aware that he'd miscalculated, badly. The patches on Tiger's jacket told stories of bar fights and petty theft, of intimidating people weaker than him and running when someone stronger showed up. But this man's stillness told a different kind of story, the kind written in blood and consequences, in decisions made in dark rooms where mercy was a luxury no one could afford. "Do you know who I am?" Tiger tried one last time, but his voice had lost its edge. "I know you're about to make a choice," the stranger said quietly. "Choose wisely." Marcus stood up abruptly, chair scraping. "Tiger, man, let's just go. It's not worth it." For a long moment, the diner existed in amber, everyone frozen, suspended between what was and what could be. Hannah was still halfway to the ground, knees bent, tears threatening. Mr. Peterson's fork hung in midair. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to count heartbeats. Then Tiger stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender, laugh forced and brittle. "Whatever, man. This place is a dump anyway." The Crimson Vipers filed out like a retreating army, Tiger shooting one last glare at the stranger, who stood perfectly still until the motorcycles roared to life outside and faded into the night, their engines growing quieter and quieter until they were just a memory of violence that hadn't happened. Hannah realized she was shaking, not the tremor she blamed on age, but a full-body earthquake of adrenaline and relief, and something she couldn't quite name. The stranger turned to her, and his face softened into something almost grandfatherly. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. He returned to his corner booth, sat down, and resumed his vigil as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just saved her from a humiliation she'd carry for the rest of her life, as if standing between the powerful and the powerless was just something people did, like breathing or blinking or any other automatic function. But Hannah knew better. She'd lived in Maple Ridge long enough to know that people didn't do that. They looked away. They pretended not to see. They saved themselves, unless they were someone else entirely. Hannah brought him fresh coffee with hands that still trembled, but this time from relief instead of fear. As she poured, she noticed details she'd missed before. The calluses on his knuckles, old and hard as stone. The way he sat with his back to the wall, eyes on the door. The careful, economical way he moved, like a man who'd learned long ago that wasted motion could get you killed. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked up at her, and for just a moment she saw past the stillness to the weight he carried, the things he'd done, the person he'd been, the ghosts that followed him into diners like this one where he sat alone and watched and waited for chances to balance scales that would never truly balance. No thanks needed. We all deserve dignity. She started to turn away, but something made her stop. Maybe it was the trimmer finally leaving her hands. Maybe it was the need to know who'd saved her. Maybe it was just that after 42 years of looking down, she was tired of not looking up. "Can I ask your name?" He smiled again, that sad, knowing smile. "Most people call me Ghost." The name hit her like cold water. She'd heard it before, whispered in the spaces between words at the grocery store, mentioned in news reports about organized crime in the city 3 hours north. Galen Harrison, the Ghost, a name that carried weight in circles where weight meant the difference between living and dying. A Mafia boss. The man who just defended her honor was one of the most dangerous men in the state. Hannah should have been terrified, should have backed away, called the police, done something other than stand there staring at him like he'd just told her he was Santa Claus.
but all she could think about was the way he'd stood up when everyone else sat down, the way he'd spoken softly when he could have shouted, the way he'd given Tiger a choice when he could have just made a decision. "Why?" the word escaped before she could stop it. "Why did you help me?" Ghost looked out the window at the darkness beyond, at the empty parking lot where the Viper's motorcycles had been minutes before. "Because I've spent most of my life doing things I can't take back, and every once in a while I get a chance to do something I won't regret. Doesn't happen often."
The diner slowly exhaled and returned to life. Mr. Peterson finished his pie. The truckers resumed their argument about routes. The cook emerged from the kitchen, eyes wide, saying nothing. And Hannah moved between tables with a lightness she hadn't felt in years, like someone had lifted a weight from her shoulders she'd forgotten she was carrying. But Ghost remained in his corner booth, and Hannah found herself watching him the way he'd been watching the room, wondering about the life that had led him here, to this moment, to this choice, the scars he carried, visible and otherwise, the debts he'd paid and the ones still outstanding, the line between monster and protector, and how thin it really was. When her shift ended at 11, she brought him his check. He paid in cash, left a tip that was 3 times the bill, and stood to leave. At the door, he paused, turned back. "Mrs. Richmond," he said, and she wondered how he knew her name. "If those boys come back and I'm not here, you call this number." He placed a card on the nearest table. Plain white, just a phone number, nothing else. "Someone will answer." I don't want to be in your debt." "You're not," Ghost said simply. "Consider it a standing offer. Nobody should have to kneel just to survive." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night like his name suggested, leaving Hannah standing in the empty diner with a card in her hand and questions she'd never get answered. She looked down at the card, memorized the number, then tucked it into her apron pocket next to her order pad and the pen that never worked right. Outside, Maple Ridge continued its evening, oblivious to the small miracle that had occurred in Rosie's diner, a miracle that had nothing to do with divine intervention and everything to do with one man choosing to stand when the world expected him to sit. 3 weeks later, Hannah was wiping down table 6 when the bell chimed and Marcus walked in, alone. No leather jacket, no swagger, just a young man who looked tired and uncertain and maybe a little bit free. "Coffee?" she asked. He nodded, sat down at the counter. "I left the Vipers." Hannah poured his coffee, said nothing, let him find his words. "That night," Marcus continued, "watching that guy stand up to Tiger, I realized something. We were all acting like we were brave, like we were strong, but we were just bullies. And that man, Ghost, or whatever his name is, he didn't have to prove anything to anyone. He just did what was right." "Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do," Hannah said softly. "Tiger's in prison now. Got picked up on a warrant 2 weeks ago. Someone made a phone call, apparently, tipped off the cops about where he'd be." Marcus smiled into his coffee. "Funny how that works out." Hannah thought about the card in her pocket, the number she hadn't called but memorized anyway. Thought about the silent man in the corner who'd returned to the shadows where men like him lived, doing things she'd never know about for reasons she'd never understand, protecting the vulnerable in his own complicated, morally ambiguous way. "Yeah," she said, "funny." The diner filled with the late lunch crowd, and Hannah moved between tables with that practiced efficiency she'd honed over 42 years. But something had changed. The tremor in her hands was gone, the weight in her chest had lifted, and when difficult customers got loud or demanding, she stood a little straighter, spoke a little firmer, and remembered that dignity wasn't something people gave you, it was something you claimed. Ghost never came back to Rosie's diner, But Hannah kept his card in her apron pocket, a talisman against the tigers of the world. A reminder that even in the darkest corners, in the most unlikely hearts, something resembling grace could still take root. And late at night, when the diner was empty and the fluorescent lights buzzed their maddening rhythm, Hannah would catch herself looking at the corner booth where he'd sat, where a ghost of a man had chosen, just for a moment, to be something more, something human, something good. The world kept spinning, Maple Ridge kept existing, but Hannah Richmond had learned something her 42 years of bending and shrinking had never taught her. Sometimes the most dangerous people were also the ones who understood, better than anyone, what it meant to be powerless. And sometimes they stood up.